So first of all, I want to formally congratulate you on your
Thank you.
offer. That is wonderful. How do you see the journey unfold?
Yeah, I remember also our first session. I remember how confused I was, and I think at the time I really didn't have a direction, and I was very anxious. And it was the summer before my senior year, and everyone else seemed to have something lined up. And so I remember speaking to my mom, and she um, brought this up as a way of giving me a direction, any direction. So that was kind
Mhm.
of my mindset coming in. I had no idea what to expect, no idea where I was going to end up. Just tried to approach it with an open mind and see where it would take me.
Mhm.
So I think that's how I started. And then over time, meeting with Bart gave me a little bit more confidence, I think, not in terms of my own ability, but just in terms of I'm going in the right direction. I think one of the biggest uh, sort of moments of growth for me throughout this entire process was not really anything to do with my ability or my soft skills or anything like that, though I learned a lot about that too, but more about
Mhm.
realizing that like there really isn't a correct path and I picked something, I stuck with it, I did my best and that was the correct path.
Mhm.
So I think that was a big learning point for me, because I'm very much the type of person who has everything planned out. And ever since I was, whatever, 11, 12, I thought I was going to do this. And then suddenly that wasn't the
Mhm.
way anymore. And yeah, so I think that was definitely something that helped me a lot.
Mhm. Okay, great to hear. So just to pick up on something that you just said a couple of times, I found intriguing. You said I built confidence that I was in the right direction, but not necessarily in my ability. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you meant by that?
Yeah, I don't know. I get very mixed feedback about whether or not I'm a confident person. My parents have always said that I'm a confident person. Bart says that during a lot of our interview preps, he said that I seemed unconfident and I needed to seem more confident.
Mhm.
And I always feel like it depends on where I am and what the situation is. I think I can be a very confident person sometimes, but in the professional corporate setting, that's just not one of those places. Um,
Mhm.
so I think by practicing the interviews and talking with Bart and doing all those exercises, I did gain a little bit more confidence in the actual skills I needed to apply for a job. But more than that, it was reassurance that I was doing something right. And I think having someone like Bart who's experienced and seen a lot of cases and has a personality of being known to not lie and give it to you straight, I think that was something that was very helpful to me.
That's great to hear. So let's go back, if you can remember, to the beginning of your coaching. What were your first impressions in your first session or two with Bart?
Well, I'd heard a lot about him before I actually met him.
Hmm.
I'd heard that he was a little intimidating and um, very straight to the point, and I can be sensitive sometimes when it comes to feedback. I'm a very emotional person, so I cry a lot, and so all of that made me a little bit nervous in terms of how our working styles were going to mesh together. But I remember the first time after I spoke to him, I went downstairs and I talked to my parents, and I was just so excited because um, I felt like he, one, wasn't as scary as I thought he was going to be, but two, still retained a lot of the
Hmm.
honesty and the kind of gravitas that I needed in my
Yes,
life.
right, right.
And and he seemed to be interested in a lot of things that other people weren't necessarily paying attention to before. So he asked me a lot of questions about what I thought I was good at and what I thought I wasn't good at. And I don't think people have really asked me that before. Um, so I think that was something that was new. That was probably my biggest impression from our first meeting, just that he wasn't as scary as I thought and he asked a lot of interesting questions.
Okay, all right, terrific. So you also you mentioned that there was a particular learning point where you realized that you didn't necessarily need to know what your career direction was. Was that early in your coaching or did that come later?
Um, I would say a little later.
Mhm.
Um, I think in the early parts, I was more focused on trying to figure out where I was going, not knowing if that was right or wrong, but just trying to stick to it anyway and at least get
Mhm.
somewhere. But I think later on, part of it was with Bart, part of it was with people mostly alumni from my dance company who I was speaking to, who had gone through basically the same process as me, and then also a lot of conversation with my parents. I realized that the future is long and far, and the next 2 or 3 years of my life does not have to dictate what the rest of it will look like. And I think my mom or my parents and Bart both showed me that, like, I don't know, when I have too much that I'm interested in, sometimes it's better to double down and focus on one thing instead of trying to find something that includes everything that I'm interested in. Um, if that makes sense. I don't know if that made sense, but that's just how
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So when I look back at our notes from our session, it sounded like consulting was one of the things that you'd been thinking about, but you weren't completely sure. Was there a point where you thought, you know what, this really seems like the right thing for me?
Mm, I don't know. I still don't know if I've gotten to that point. I think, I mean,
Okay.
we'll see when I start working. Maybe I'll let you know. But
Yeah, sure.
it was only on my radar because at Penn, it's such a huge thing and everyone talks about it. And it's that or investment banking. Those are like the two biggest things that everyone talks about. So of course I knew about it. And I also knew some of the more stereotypical interpretations of that job. A lot of people work, client facing stuff, presentations, logic. And I feel like those are all things that I was good at. But again, I wasn't sure because I also knew about what people said were very long work hours and a very kind of hierarchical structure. And so there were a lot of things that were deterring me just as much as they were drawing me in. Um, but after talking to Bart, he also brought up potentially some other things that I could go into. Marketing was one of them, investment banking was one of them. And then after analyzing all those options, I think it wasn't that something clicked for me. And I was like, whoa, consulting is the one. It was more just, it was the
Mhm.
lesser of all the other evils.
Was there something in particular about it that made consulting the lesser of the evils?
Well, I like that, first of all, it's very structured. Um,
Mhm.
I'm big on structure. I like organization. I like knowing what is expected of me. And this is like more realistic, but when I was looking at the application process for each of these different roles, it really stood out to me that consulting had a very structured application process. You turn in a form and then you get invited to however many rounds of interviews. And every round of interview, you know what to expect and what you're meant to do. So you know exactly how to prepare for it. And I think that gave me a more control in how I was preparing for it. So that was definitely also one of the aspects.
When you think back on your coaching, because obviously it's been a brief period so far and things happen quickly, what did you learn that might have surprised you a little bit about yourself?
That's a good question. Okay, I think two things. The first thing was during coaching, and I mentioned this earlier, but Bart kept telling me that I didn't seem very confident, and that surprised
Okay.
me because my parents always told me I was confident, and I've always been pretty good at public speaking, interviews. Those never really worried me, and so that was surprising. But I think now I understand what he means. Um, Especially in a corporate interview or very competitive situation, there's a lot you have to do to seem confident besides just feel confident. Whether that was the way I structured my answers, the speed at which I spoke, that was a big one. He kept telling me to slow everything down to 50%.
Oh
Um,
my God. Uh-huh.
yeah. um, yeah. So I think that the first thing that shocked me was that I didn't appear as confident as I felt sometimes. And then I
Mhm.
took a lot of steps, worked a lot with Bart to improve that. And I think I got there by the end. And then the second thing I learned about myself was after this whole thing was over, and I got my offer. I distinctly remember before I got my offer when we were still evaluating all the companies, and Bart gave me this assignment of doing research on all the firms that I want to apply to. And we came back together and I gave him a rundown of all the things I researched. And then he gave me a rundown of what he had researched. And when we were talking about McKinsey, um, the first word that he used was cutthroat. He said that you have to be very cutthroat, very competitive. Like you have to want to have that drive and that ambition to be better than everyone else. And I heard that and I thought, oh, that is not me. But after putting in the work and realizing that that's something that I was capable of, I think that can be me. And that was something that really surprised me. Not cutthroat. I know that has a very negative connotation, but I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean more like ambitious. And when I put my mind to something, I really can do it. So
Focused
I
and
didn't
disciplined.
exactly. Yeah. And
Mhm.
I've always thought of myself as a very disciplined person. Um, but it's in this sense when it's not just about your own discipline, but like there's a lot of outward competition as well. I think that tends to get in my head a little bit, but I guess I made it happen. So
Oh, you did. You did. Did you ever have moments, as many students do, during the coaching process and during the interview process, where you doubted yourself enough to say, hey, is this really the right, should I be doing this?
yeah, I think those moments were more frequent than the others. I remember almost every time, maybe sometimes after a session with Bart would end, I would turn off my computer and my parents would be waiting downstairs wanting to know what we talked about, but I would just have to sit in my room and either cry or just sit there and stare at the wall for a while and think about everything. And it wasn't anything he was doing. He's wonderful, but um it's hard when you are doing something that I had no experience doing, nothing financial, no economic background, and I was just getting pummeled with all these different terms like return on investment, and I didn't know what any of those things meant.
Hmm. Right.
And then he would give me all these things to work on, and the way he delivers them, it's very bang 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 bang, and just felt like everything was hitting me at once. So there were a lot of moments of doubt there. Yeah, a lot, definitely.
How did those resolve? I mean, did you have a certain like period of time that you said to yourself every week between sessions, I'm gonna spend X amount of time on this or that, or how did you approach the process of learning what you needed to?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty free this summer. I didn't have much to do
Mhm.
besides this and just stay at home and
Right.
ride my horses and dance. So I was
Hmm.
spending a good amount of time on this every single day. And I think the thought that kept me going was the only way it can feel better is through practice and through repetition. So no matter
Hmm.
how painful it is, you just have to keep going. And once you muscle through the hard part, you're going to come out the other side. And I think that was kind of the thought process that kept me going. And it was also nice to be at home because it was a very low stakes environment. I didn't have to put up this face for anyone else. Like I
Hmm.
said, I'm very emotional and I cry a lot, but it really helps me process how I feel. And so after a bad day or a bad session, I would just cry for a while and then I would feel better and I would keep going. So I think that's just how I tend to deal with things. And my parents know that and they're able to be there to support me. And they're always willing to help me do mock interviews. And their English isn't the best. So it's okay if I say something wrong because they probably won't really understand it anyway.
That's great. It's nice that you have them there to support you. That is very nice. Do you feel that you have personally changed or evolved through this process in a broader way? And if so, how?
Mm, another good question. Let me think about that for a second. I want to say yes. I think in a lot of different ways, definitely the way I can react in a high pressure situation. The way I interact with people, I think, has changed, especially in a more formal or professional setting after doing all that interview training and going in person for my final round interviews. So I think all of that I feel a lot more equipped to handle. Um, but I think there are also long term changes that I won't be able to see until I start working for a little bit. I would say this experience has made me more aware, first of all, of everything that's happening around me. I feel like I'm no longer just a college student living in a bubble. I have a lot more social awareness, professional awareness, just generally what people are demanding from me. I would also say that, I don't know, I would also say that this has made me more realistic, but I don't know exactly what I mean by that. I think I don't know. I think it's just a little bit of that childish, immature, like, I don't know, unawareness of my surroundings has gone away a little bit, if that makes sense.
Oh. No, I mean that can happen, and that's a good thing. That should happen. What do you think was most responsible for that particular piece happening?
I think two things. First is just general exposure to to a very different world than what I had been experiencing.
Mhm.
Knowing what it takes, finding out more about this field, what people actually do. I think everything, just all this new information being absorbed has just fundamentally changed the way I think about a lot of things and my knowledge of what's out there. And then again, Bart for working with me the way he did, not treating me like a child and always giving it to me straight. I think that was a type of interaction that I haven't had in my life a lot with an adult, because obviously I have my parents, I have my teachers who of course will treat me like an adult, but not in this way. They're
Mhm.
still sugarcoating their criticisms and all that kind of stuff. So I think he was the first person to really treat me like an adult and give me feedback in that way.
Sounds. Is there anything that he ever said that really surprised you, really made you think in a different way?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time he would say things that were very ambitious, but say things in terms of for me. So, for example, I
Mhm.
remember after I got my offer, I emailed him. Obviously, we were super excited, and then talking back and forth about next steps. And we are taking a break for this semester. He told me to just enjoy my senior fall, and then in the spring, we'll start to talk again about how I can succeed in the corporate world. And I remember one line in his email said, "Why not be the youngest?" Why not be the youngest partner in history? And he just says things like that a lot. Obviously,
Wow.
it's nothing that I like have ever thought about, but
Mhm.
his like ambition and his determination and his courage to actually say those things makes me feel like it is possible, because I know he wouldn't lie to me like that. So every time he says something like that, it surprises me a little, but also changes the way that I see myself and the way I think he sees me. And I also remember the first ever like really nice thing he ever said to me was one time, about halfway through coaching. I was struggling a lot and I started crying, but obviously I was trying to look like I wasn't
Mhm.
crying. And he said something along the lines of, "You're doing great. You're doing the right thing." And that's all he said. But it was the first like really affirmative thing that he said to me. And it made me feel really good.
That's great.
Yeah.
So obviously a lot to think about. Have you met the people that you're going to be working with? Yeah.
Yeah, I've met some people in the office, both through the in-person interview. That was on a Friday, and they do this office lunch on Fridays. And so during breaks between my interviews, I was able to go meet people. They were playing games, and so I got to speak to a lot of people who work there too, which was awesome. And then after I got my offer, they hosted a couple of dinners in the city where I got to meet incoming analysts, kind of in the same position as me. Some were from Penn, and I actually made a good friend who is in my grade, and I'm excited to start working with him.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. It's probably kind of early, but have you thought at all about the future? Not necessarily when you'll be partner, but anything else?
Yeah, I find myself constantly thinking about it. That's another thing that's changed. I think I used to not think about it as much, but not because I didn't want to, more because I didn't know what was in the future, and that really scared me. But I think having taken this concrete step, I feel a lot more sure. And also with the knowledge that it doesn't have to be permanent, I'm less afraid to think about the future. And so I don't know, as much as I appreciate Bart's uh belief in me to be the youngest partner, I don't know if that's really what I want to do. I think my thought process is more for the next 2 or 3 years, just work as hard as I can and meet as many people as possible. And most importantly, try and explore as many industries and fields as possible.
Mhm.
I'm really hoping that that will give me a better sense of what I want to do after this. And I also know from speaking to some other partners who work at McKinsey that they have a pretty good system in place where if you want to leave after 2 or 3 years to explore something else, you have the option to come back, and they make that apparently fairly easy for you. And so I think having that door open is another thing that brings me a sense of comfort and excitement.
Wonderful. Are there any areas that you personally are kind of working on developing that are on your agenda?
Um, um, Before work or after I start?
Either. And it could be personal or professional too.
Well, I'm trying to stay, I forget the term that you guys use on the website. Is it cultural awareness?
Sure. Uh-huh. Could be, we discuss both commercial awareness and cultural awareness, but they're
Yes.
related.
I'm working on
Yeah.
both of those. I'm trying
Okay.
to really stay updated on the news, especially I never used to consider myself like a finance or politics person, but I think now that I'm working in a related field, it's always good to know about the things that are going on. So I'm trying, even though I wouldn't say it's my forte or something that I enjoy massively, but I'm trying. Um,
Uh-huh.
I Yeah, I think for now, before work, I don't have that much that I actually want to do besides just make the most out of my last year. There are so many things that I still want to do, and I don't want to regret
Mhm.
anything by the time that it ends. But I know that once I start work, I have a lot of goals. I want to be able to refocus a little bit. I think college has been a little wishy-washy for me, and I've been able to kind of coast by and do pretty well without really zoning in. So I think working on the focus part, and also just like I don't know, not being so afraid to try new things. Yeah.
Okay. I guess kind of a last question, if you don't mind. Let's say there was someone that wanted to get into a top firm and they really were sort of where your mindset was, let's say a year ago or something. What kind of advice would you maybe give them?
This is funny because I have had multiple people reach out to me on LinkedIn saying that they're in a similar position, wanting to talk to me. And part of me feels very not qualified to be giving them advice because I don't know why I got in. But I've had a couple of those chats, and a couple of things I always say. One is to practice, 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 no matter how painful
Mhm,
it is. It always gets better with repetition. Um,
mhm,
I would also say to find a mentor like Bart or someone who can always be honest with you and kind of guide you to make sure you're going in the right direction and give you just unfiltered feedback, but also a lot of positive reinforcement. I think that was super, super important in my journey. And then I would also say to not feel so bogged down by the options. I know I ultimately ended up pursuing consulting, but I really truly think there is so much out there that I probably don't even know about. So just to keep an open mind, like this is, I tell when people ask me what I want to do in the future, I always tell them the next 2, 3 years are not the end goal. It's just part of the journey or a stepping stone to see where else I go. So yeah, I think that's what I would say.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the great things about consulting is you can take it in so many different directions. Um, so, and it is important to keep an open mind because so many of the jobs that are going to exist even 5 years from now don't exist now. So it will be a whole new world. But thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing this. I'm going to turn off the recording, but we
Okay.
really appreciate it. Very inspiring.
Yeah.